The events discussed in this video took place in the city of Duluth, which is located in northern Georgia. In April 2005, a woman named Jennifer Wilbanks disappeared just 4 days before her own wedding. Hundreds of people came looking for her, and the story of her disappearance drew the attention of international media. Many women fantasize about the day when they would marry the person they love. They believe that this grand event will be unique in their lives, so they want the wedding ceremony to be at least as good as everyone else's. Making a guest list, choosing a venue, choosing a menu, buying a wedding dress were all exciting moments 32-year-old Jennifer Wilbanks went through. Jennifer Carol Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973. She has spent her entire life in Georgia, where her family, friends, and work have been. It was here in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John, like his family as a whole, was financially wealthy. The Masons owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring man, ready to help in time of need. John and Jennifer had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was thrilled at the news that they had decided to get married. Preparations for the wedding went their way. The swanky ceremony, to which several hundred guests had been invited, was scheduled for April 30, 2005, which was a Saturday. However, 4 days before the wedding, on Tuesday, April 26th, John Mason reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. She had gone for an evening run, he said, from which she never returned. He tried to find her on his own, but when he could not, he decided to ask law enforcement for help. The next day, April 27th, a search was organized with more than 300 police officers and volunteers. They searched the wooded area and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. In such cases, every minute counts, so the police even involved those officers who were supposed to be off duty. On the same day, April 27th, one of the search teams found possible clues, namely clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long dark hair. All of the findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family posted and handed out flyers with her image in the hope that someone might have seen her or have some important information for the investigation. The media got involved in covering the story. Plus, billboards with Jennifer's image appeared in the city. The police checked the house where she lived with John, but it was more of a formality. Detectives found nothing suspicious in the couple's home. On Thursday, April 28th, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer Wilbanks' disappearance was being treated as a criminal investigation, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. A second day of searching yielded no results either. No sign of Jennifer was found. Her family members were shocked by what had happened and did all they could. They asked radio stations and various TV stations to publicize the story of Jennifer's disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. They begged the possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels swarmed over the incident like flies on a pie. Where was Jennifer? Did something bad occur? She didn't take her purse and keys. She was going to be married in 4 days during a grand wedding to which she planned to invite 28 chaperones and 600 guests. Not calling her family was not Jennifer's style. Her sobbing relatives stressed during press conferences and interviews. In this picture, you can see an unhappy groom, John Mason, comforting his bride's mother. Those who often watch real crime videos have probably already solved this case mentally and guessed who had a hand in Jennifer's disappearance. Answer one question for yourself. Have you figured out who will end up in the dock? John was the last person to see Jennifer alive, and when the search yielded no results, suspicion began to fall on him. The detectives decided to find out who was hiding under the guise of a law-abiding do-gooder who attended church every Sunday and, as his friends say, couldn't even hurt a fly. The man was asked to take a lie detector test, and of course he refused. Instead, he took a private polygraph test in the presence of his lawyer, the results of which were given to the police. However, Such a strange and unusual act only increased the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results given to the police did not definitively answer the question of whether John was connected to the disappearance of his fiancée. In an attempt to determine whether he had any motive to get rid of Jennifer, detectives conducted a more thorough search of the couple's home, from which they seized 3 computers. It is important to note that no signs of a struggle or any other crime were found in the house. On Friday, April 29th, the day before her wedding day, Jennifer's relatives offered a $100,000 reward for information that would help find her, dead or alive. Police held a press conference at which officials announced that they were stopping the active part of the search. According to the head of the local police, they must have looked over every possible lead in this town. There were absolutely no clues, and that's why they decided to call off the search in the area. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle suggested that John simply didn't know what to say, which didn't add to the speculation about his involvement in his fiancée's disappearance. In the meantime, it turned out that the clothes, shoes, and lock of hair found on the first day of the search had nothing to do with Jennifer's disappearance. According to police reports, these finds turned out to be just litter. The only suspect who might have had a motive was John. Journalists were at his house around the clock and literally followed him on his heels. There was little doubt that he was involved in the disappearance of the bride, but confirmation had yet to be found. The next day, April 30th, was supposed to be spent at the wedding, but now people were gathering to pray for Jennifer's safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John's phone rang. A number appeared on the screen. John's phone rang. A number appeared on the screen, but John did not know who it belonged to. When John answered the phone and put it to his ear, he was almost speechless. He heard Jennifer's voice. She reported that she had been kidnapped, taken somewhere, and forced to be intimate. She was crying and said that after all was done, she had been released and now she didn't know where she was. This picture captures John rejoicing that his beloved is alive. "I cried, I laughed, I tried to stay calm, to talk to her, to keep her calm," John said. He had no idea yet that his joy would soon be overshadowed by one interesting circumstance. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911. She informed the operator that she had been kidnapped and then released, and that she did not know where she was. The number from which she called was traced as the call was made from a payphone located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is more than 1,400 miles from the city of Duluth, Georgia. Police officers were dispatched to the address where the phone was located, and when they arrived, they found Jennifer. Her family thanked all concerned people, as well as the media, who, according to the family, had succeeded in convincing the kidnapper to release Jennifer. When the police took Jennifer to the station, they noticed that her appearance did not match the accounts of what she said. Her captors, whom she described as a man and a woman in their 40s, were doing to her in a blue van with her hands and feet tied inside. The FBI agents who came to talk to Jennifer quickly identified inconsistencies in her story, and when they pointed these inconsistencies out to her, she admitted that no one had kidnapped her. On April 26th, she told John that she was going for a run, but instead went to the station and boarded the bus that brought her to New Mexico. According to her, she did so because she could not stand the pressure and excitement of her upcoming wedding. News outlets found that she had a history of criminal behavior, including 3 separate charges of shoplifting. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of merchandise from Walmart. In 1997, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She was 24 years old at the time. Jennifer repaid the damages and was placed on community service, and after completing that, the theft charges were dropped. In 1998, she was caught stealing again, this time for $98 in damages. She was also accused of stealing from the homes of people who hired her as a nanny. She always managed to avoid imprisonment because the thefts were petty. After her kidnapping story ended, all was well in some sense. Jennifer was found alive and unharmed, but on the other hand, the state of Georgia has spent nearly $60,000 searching for her. On April 30th, Jennifer returned to Duluth. To shield herself from the attention of the people and reporters greeting her at the airport, she hid her head under a plaid. There was no more talk of the wedding, which was scheduled for that day, and it was postponed indefinitely. She left Georgia because of the pressures of the wedding, Officer Michael Medrano said. The list of things she needed to get done, and no time to do it, made her feel overwhelmed. It turns out that Miss Wilbanks basically felt the pressure of this large wedding and could not handle it, Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher added. John turned out to be an abandoned bridegroom who, contrary to rumors, suspicions, and baseless accusations, had nothing to do with his bride's disappearance. Jennifer was dubbed the runaway bride. She publicly apologized to her family, friends, and residents. According to John, the first thing he did when he saw Jennifer again was to give her the engagement ring she had left behind to show that he still wanted to marry her. Just because we haven't walked down the aisle, just because we haven't stood in front of the 500 people and said our I do's, my commitment before God to her was the day I bought that ring and put it on her finger, Mason said on Fox. And I'm not backing down from that now. On May 9, 2005, Jennifer went to a medical facility to address the physical and mental problems that she believed were instrumental in her escape. On May 25, 2005, she was charged with making false statements relating to her abduction. She faced up to 5 years in prison for this charge. On June 2, 2005, as part of a plea bargain, Jennifer was found guilty of perjury and sentenced to 2 years probation and 120 hours of community service. She was also ordered to pay just over $15,000 in restitution for expenses incurred by the city in her search. The story doesn't end there, however. In September 2006, Jennifer sued her, now ex-fiancé John Mason. The couple had by this time broken off their engagement and separated. In the lawsuit, Jennifer claimed that while she was in treatment, she gave John power of attorney to act on her behalf. According to her, John sold the rights to their story for $500,000 to Reagan Media. He used the proceeds to buy a house, which was registered to his name only. Now that they had broken up, John had kicked her out of the house. Jennifer demanded $250,000 in compensation for her share of the house and another $250,000 in damages. John Mason countersued, claiming emotional distress over being left at the altar and suspected involvement in Jennifer's disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits. Allegedly, a settlement was reached between them. Thanks to the attention of not only American but also various world media, Jennifer became popular for a while, and some companies wanted to make money from her fame. Hero Builders, a manufacturer of figurines, rushed to create a doll depicting Jennifer Wilbanks in a sports suit with "Vegas Baby" written on it. Included was a small towel that was placed over the doll's head to imitate the woman's appearance on television when she returned to Duluth. Wilbanks has inspired a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightailin' Hot Sauce. A musical play based on the story of Jennifer Wilbanks opened on March 13, 2008 at the Red Clay Theater in Duluth, Georgia. A photo of Wilbanks appears in the trailer of the 2008 movie about professional poker, The Grand, as one of the many women Woody Harrelson's character has been married to in the past. John Mason, who had already once spent a lot of money on a failed wedding where several hundred people had been invited, married another woman in 2008 in a quiet ceremony at his parents' home in Duluth. Jennifer married in 2010, but 11 years later the marriage dissolved and she still lives in Georgia. In this video, we take a look at a story that took place in the year 2021 and involved two countries far apart. Shanae Brooke Edwards, 31, was an Australian citizen and avid traveler. One of her travels took her to the Eastern European country of Georgia, where Shanae really liked and where frightening events happened to her. Shanae was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia, where she lived with her parents and older brother Tyson. There is little information online about her youth and upbringing, but here is how her loved ones described her. Shania was an adventurer who loved being amongst nature, a keen hiker, motorcyclist, and a genuine kind-hearted soul, an animal lover. She was a happy, free spirit. She moved through life making the kind of deep, sincere connections that most of us reserve only for a select few. She extended generosity, patience, love, and kindness to all who crossed her path, to name a few. The homeless she shared cafe leftovers with at her shift's end in Melbourne, the orphan children she taught in Colombia, the Cambodian children she taught English, the Japanese students she tutored, and most recently, the pregnant stray cat that adopted Shania and decided to become a mother on her terrace in Georgia. Shania came to Georgia, which had long attracted her with its nature, history, and sights, in 2019. Shania's boyfriend, Maudi El Sayed, was also scheduled to fly to this Eastern European country. He was a Lebanese national whom she had met during one of her travels. They had broken up for a while, but when Shania lived in Georgia, they began to communicate online, and then realized that they still had feelings for each other and so decided to reunite. El Sayed wanted to fly to Georgia, but could not do so because that country's borders were closed to people who had not been vaccinated. Georgia is an ancient, proud, and hospitable country known for its welcoming locals, the majestic beauty of nature and ancient temples, and its amazingly delicious cuisine. Shania had high expectations for her trip to Georgia, and those expectations were fully met. She was happy in the country and lived there for almost 2 years before her next outing went awry. Shania lived in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi and taught English, which helped her earn a living, and at the same time, she could find free time to travel around the country and visit new and interesting places. Over time, she found like-minded friends who were travel enthusiasts like her. On July 29, 2021, she posted this photo on her social media account and captioned it with one word: joy. The photo was taken during a scenic ride on a motorcycle. Shania was very fond of motorcycles. The next day, July 30th, 2021 was sunny, so Shania decided to take a hike up Mtatsminda. Please don't judge me too harshly if I mispronounce the name of this place. Mtatsminda, which means holy mountain, is located almost in the center of the Georgian capital and is one of its main attractions. On the slope of the mountain, in the thickets of evergreen vegetation, is the Temple of St. David. Mtatsminda is a popular destination for tourists and city residents. On the 730-meter-high mountain, there are observation decks overlooking Tbilisi, an amusement park, a Ferris wheel, and a restaurant. For the past 11 months, Shania had been renting a house near the mountain. According to her friends, she often took walks in the wooded area and never had any problems or threats to her personal safety. On July 30th, 2021, she left the house at approximately 3:30 p.m. Surveillance cameras captured the moment. She walked leisurely through the city streets toward the hiking trail. She was last seen near the Church of St. Michael of Tver, which is located at the foot of Mount Mtatsminda and is a kind of starting point for hiking. In the evening, she was supposed to meet some friends at a cafe in the capital, but she never showed up. Attempts to contact her by phone were fruitless, and then Shania's friends decided to file a missing persons report with the police. At about the same time, a friend of Shania's who lives in California sounded the alarm. At 4:32 p.m., Shania called her, and when she answered the phone, she heard her screaming, "Please let me go, okay? Just let me go." You could tell that Shania was being attacked by someone, and she was asking to be left alone. The call was disconnected, and when Shania's friend began to call back, no one answered. Different sources describe in different ways what Shania's friend who lives in California did next. Some news outlets wrote that she posted to a Facebook group where members were people from different countries currently living in Georgia, and she asked someone to contact the police to report the disturbing call. Other sources say that Shania's friend herself contacted the Georgian police and told them everything. Whatever the case, it is certain that within hours after Shania made the frightening phone call, the Georgian police became aware of it and immediately began to check the information they had received. Several hundred police officers and volunteers were involved in the search. The area to be searched was large, and so numerous groups combed the slopes of Mount Mtatsminda. The police used search dogs and drones. Shania could not be found before sunset. She had not returned home, her phone was off, and she had not gone to any of the local hospitals for help. This was not a good sign, as was confirmed the next day. Unfortunately, on July 31st, after an intensive search, 31-year-old Shania Brooke Edwards was found dead near a hiking trail. The perpetrator tried to cover up the evidence of the crime, so he hid the body under tree branches and leaves. The crime weapon, a knife, was found not far from the body. Below on the mountainside, Shania's phone was soon found. On further inspection of the crime scene, police found an old rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and many empty bottles. Georgia's interior minister told local media that the police had some information that was not disclosed in the interest of the investigation. The ministry and police officers are doing everything they can to find the perpetrator, he said. During the forensic examination of Shania's body, they counted 13 stab wounds, 5 of which were in the neck area, which to the police meant only one thing. The perpetrator, without a doubt, intended to take the young woman's life. There were also signs of strangulation on her neck. After Shania's death was officially confirmed by the authorities, the media reported that the crime had been motivated by lust. The Georgian police, however, denied this information, as the forensic medical examiner did not find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Shania's enraged boyfriend, Maudi El Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit no matter how long it takes and get back at him. "Right now, I have one mission in life, revenge," he said. "I don't care if I spend the rest of my life behind bars, justice will be served and the criminal will suffer as much as Shania did," he added. Shania's death was a heavy blow to her friends and a particularly difficult experience for her family, who lived on another continent. The relatives had to solve the problem of transporting the body home, and the police had to find the culprit. No doubt, crime prevention and finding criminals is a direct responsibility of the police, but in this case there was another important factor. Georgia's revenue from tourism exceeds $1 billion a year, and the fact that one of the travelers lost their life in a popular place, the capital of the state, could have had a negative impact on the entire tourism industry. The police interviewed more than 200 people, including friends, co-workers, Shania's neighbors, and park employees and visitors. Routes were studied, as well as video footage of her movements that day. One local woman wrote in an expat Facebook group that she heard a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park about an hour after Shania left home. Another woman wrote in the same group that she witnessed a disturbing sight on the mountain. She claimed that exactly one day before Shania went missing, she had seen a man aggressively copulating with a woman in approximately the same area where the crime had taken place. At the same time, the laboratory examined the crime weapon and found a male DNA sample on it. No matches were found in the Georgian police database, so the samples were sent to 194 Interpol member states to be checked in the databases of those countries. Interviews with witnesses showed that Shania had no enemies, had no conflicts with anyone, and had no contact with people of dubious reputation. This may have meant she was a random victim of a crime for which the motive was unclear. The police worked painstakingly. Genetic samples were taken from several dozen people who could theoretically have been involved in the crime. All were subjected to rigorous analysis. As a result of complex and multifaceted investigative efforts, the circle of alleged perpetrators was narrowed until a DNA match was found. 40 days after the death of Shania Brooke Edwards, Georgia police issued the following statement. Based on the evidence obtained during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance tapes, genetic tests, and other evidence, a man born in 1988 was arrested on September 8 this year as the defendant in accordance with the decision of the court. The detainee was Georgian citizen Rafael Mirsakulov. His lawyer told reporters that Mirsakulov denies all the charges against him, namely robbery and taking the life of Shania Brooke Edwards. He pleads not guilty. He had nothing to do with the case. I've already seen him, we've talked, and we've decided on a position. He's exercising the right to remain silent, the lawyer said. When information about the suspect's identity leaked to the press, Mirsakulov's image was shown on television. After that, a woman from the Georgian capital wrote a post on her Facebook page stating that her friend had been attacked by two wild beasts on Mount Matatsminda a few months ago. Although the police knew the identity of the perpetrators, the case was shelved. As the woman claimed in her post, one of the attackers was Rafael Mursakulov. The author of the post suggested that if the police had done their job well, the Australian girl would probably be alive. As for those data of Rafael Mursakulov, which he himself openly shared on his Facebook page, the man was an activist of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court refused to release Mursakulov on bail. While he was awaiting trial in custody, police officers, in addition to the irrefutable physical evidence they had, obtained a no less important testimony. It was decided that after the attack on Shania Brooke Edwards, Mursakulov returned home and told his brother and his wife about the crime, but warned them that if they told anyone about it, their young child would suffer the same fate as Shania. In October 2021, the Edwards family published a letter describing what Shania was like and thanked everyone for their support. In particular, they thanked Georgia for their financial assistance in repatriating Shania's body and the Georgian people for their continued attention, love, and support during this difficult and tragic time. The first hearing on the case took place in February 2022. Under Georgian law, Mursakulov faced 16 to 20 years in prison. He chose not to exercise his right to remain silent and pleaded guilty at the trial to robbery, but denied the charge that he acted intentionally when he took Shania's life. However, the prosecutor didn't think so. In his opinion, the number of stab wounds spoke to the defendant's intent to take the victim's life. He stabbed Shania Brooke 13 times, including 5 in the neck, indicating intent to take her life. Moreover, after his knife broke, the defendant strangled the victim, the prosecutor said. In turn, the defense insisted on qualifying the crime as robbery. Mursakulov pleaded guilty to robbery, and that was the motive. He repented of what he had done, said his lawyer. Also, the defense insisted that Mursakulov has mental problems and acted in an abnormal state. Meanwhile, the examination found Mursakulov sane, so the court had the right to impose a real punishment on him, depending on the qualification of the crime. According to the prosecutor, after the arrest, traces of potent drugs were found in Mursakulov's blood, but this in no way detracts from his guilt. Mursakulov himself, in his last statement, admitted guilt and apologized to Shania Brooke Edwards' family. "I apologize to this country, to the people. I apologize to this woman's family. It's a loss I can't make up for. Just forgive me. Whatever the sentence, I will be silent and I will not appeal it. I apologize," said Mursakulov, and cried. The alleged motive was the desire of the defendant to seize Shania's iPhone 12. He failed to do so because she threw the phone into a ravine. In any case, only 2 people knew about what happened that day, and one of them will tragically never speak again. Sentencing was postponed at the request of the prosecution because the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to be present at the sentencing. The family of Shania Brooke Edwards issued a statement urging the Georgian justice system to sentence Rafael Mursakulov to life imprisonment. "We lost our beautiful girl, incredibly tragically. She left many friends and family members disappointed and devastated. We are proud of all the successes that Shania has achieved in many countries during her short life," the statement of Shania Brooke Edwards' family reads. At the trial held on March 9, 2022, Rafael Mursakulov was found guilty. Shania's brother Tyson, on behalf of the family, once again asked that the defendant be sentenced to life imprisonment. Mursakulov apologized to Tyson Edwards, saying that he's not that kind of person and that he just got into this situation. As a result, 33-year-old Rafael Mursakulov was sentenced to 20 years in prison. According to Georgian law, 20 years is the maximum sentence he could receive. In this video, we will take a look at events that happened in Malaysia in 2003. 28-year-old Kanny Ong disappeared from the parking lot of a metropolitan mall where she had dinner with people close to her. Her family filed a disappearance report to the police, and soon the authorities made a shocking discovery. The story of Canny Ong still lives in the memory of many Malaysians. This tragedy has shaken the country, not only because of its terrible and nonsensical nature, but also because it happened in a popular and prestigious mall equipped with surveillance cameras. Canny Ong Lay Kian was born in Malaysia on July 18, 1974. She was the younger of two daughters and had a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Canny went to the USA to get an education and try to build a career in the field of information technology. Living in the United States, she met a guy named Brandon. He was a US citizen and an ethnic Chinese, whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Canny and Brandon were friends at first, but soon their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a really close person to Canny. He tried to support her in everything and help her. In 2001, the couple got married. Canny had everything she dreamed about in terms of both her career and personal life. In 2003, she worked as an analyst in San Diego, was building plans for the future together with her husband, and wanted to become a mother. But that year, a sequence of certain events ultimately resulted in horrible events happening. In 2003, Canny's father, Ong Bi Jung, was diagnosed with cancer, and she made a decision to return to Malaysia to visit him and help her family through this ordeal. On June 1, 2003, Canny landed in Malaysia with Brandon. Brandon returned to the USA in a couple of days, and Canny stayed in Kuala Lumpur and devoted most of her time to caring for her father, who was being treated at one of the clinics in the capital. Every day, she talked with Brandon on the phone for hours on end. They talked about everything, including their two cats, and she reproached him for overfeeding them. It almost sounded like they were talking about their children. Canny's father had his kidney removed, but luckily, his health was getting better. He was recovering. That's why, on June 14, 2003, Canny planned to return to the USA. The day before the flight, she invited her mother Pearlie, sister Elsie, and close friends to a farewell dinner at the restaurant located in one of the popular malls. That evening, on June 13, 2003, Canny and her mother arrived at the designated place later than others. Being unable to find a parking spot on the street in front of the mall, Canny had to drive inside the underground parking lot, which was not free. But it wasn't the fee that Canny's mother worried about, but the fact that the parking lot was poorly lit. Having left the car, they got up to the second floor, where the restaurant was located. Canny was happy to see her childhood friends. She hadn't seen some of them for a very long time, and they had a lot to talk about. In a few hours, she started noticing that Pearlie looked tired. She asked the mother if she wanted to go home, to which Pearlie replied that she had a very busy day and didn't mind leaving. Telling her friends that she will be back soon, Canny got up from the table with her mother and her sister Elsie. The three of them went to the machine to pay for parking. The payment terminal was located on the first floor of the mall, and the parking, as I said, was underground. Standing in the queue for the terminal, Canny realized that she had left a parking ticket in the car. She told her sister and mother to stay in line and went down to get the ticket. The terminal queue was gone, but Canny still hasn't come back. 10 more minutes passed, and her sister started calling her. The first call remained unanswered, and the second one was redirected to a voicemail. Something was clearly wrong. Elsie and Pearlie immediately headed to the parking lot, where, to their surprise, they found out that Canny's car was no longer there. They went around the parking lot several times, after which they were absolutely sure that Canny disappeared along with the car. Pearlie was sure that something had happened with her daughter, as Canny wouldn't drive off without saying anything. The parking lot had poor lighting, but there were surveillance cameras that could provide some answers. The mall security didn't want to show the footage to Canny's relatives at first, but gave in after her mother's pleas for help. Around midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the footage that shocked them and confirmed their worst fears. The footage showed Canny's car exiting the underground parking lot at high speed and breaking the barrier, and somebody else was driving it. The footage quality was not good, but it was clear that the person in the driver's seat was probably a man, and Canny was sitting next to him in the passenger seat. And her body position was as if she were tucked against the door, trying to keep herself as far as possible from the driver. After seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately went to a police station, where she filed a disappearance and kidnapping report on her daughter. The police began the investigation, and Canny's family and friends were driving all around Kuala Lumpur, desperately hoping to spot her car, a purple Proton Tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Canny's husband, started to realize that something was wrong. He dialed the wife's number many times but wasn't able to reach her. He dialed her mother, from whom he learned about what happened. The disappearance of Canny shocked Brandon. Pearlie heard how he was crying on the phone. Only at dawn did Canny's friends and relatives go to their homes. Sadly, their search was unsuccessful. The police were spreading information about the disappearance and conducting their own search, which also didn't bring any hope. Footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was kidnapped didn't help in identifying the man who was driving the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Canny's loved ones have last seen her. It was obvious to the authorities that if Canny Ong was indeed kidnapped, it was not for ransom, as if money were the motive, the kidnapper would have come forward a long time ago and demanded ransom. And this state of affairs did not bode well, which was confirmed that same day. The police made a sinister discovery. Canny's car was left on one of the city streets. The front right tire was in such a condition that it is safe to say that the car had been driven with a flat tire for a while, as a result of which it was literally ripped to pieces. In the back of the car at the passenger seat, there was a red stain, a large one at that. Forensic experts took scrapings from the back seat and fingerprints from the steering wheel, as well as other parts of the car. There was a lot of evidence in the car. I will talk about it more later. Canny's family and friends didn't lose hope, and were praying that she would return to them safely. But sadly, the next day after the car was found, all their hopes were crushed. On June 17th, a road worker caught a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near a highway. When he lifted the lid, he saw a body that someone was trying to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived on the scene. 2 car tires filled with concrete that were once used as stands for road signs were lying on top of the body. Whoever hid it there was trying to make it harder to identify it. The family's worst fears could be confirmed after the body was found, but Pearlie said that she won't believe that her daughter is dead until she gets confirmation. Until they do so, we will continue to hope she will turn up alive, she said. The family headed to the morgue, but the doctors said that they still couldn't confirm that this was Canny Ong's. Family members had samples of their DNA taken to conduct a comparative analysis. The results of expertise made Canny's parents' worst nightmare come true. The found body is indeed that of their daughter. Some sources claim that even before the DNA test results, Canny's family identified the jewelry on the body, but as a loving mother, Pearlie believed and hoped that her daughter was alive until the end. It is hard to imagine what emotional torture she had to go through. The autopsy revealed that Canny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen. A medical forensics expert has also found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around Canny's neck in several knots. In addition, semen was found inside her body, serving as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, there was an event that raised many questions regarding the work of law enforcement agencies. A policeman, working undercover, by the name of Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Canny's disappearance, he was on duty on his motorcycle along with his partner, patrolling the streets of a nighttime Kuala Lumpur. Both he and his partner were dressed in civilian clothes. They saw a car, parked at the wrong spot, taking up half of the road, and decided to stop near it to see if anyone was inside. Walking up to the driver's door, Ravichandran saw a man sitting behind the wheel and a woman next to him on the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man behind the wheel lowered it a third of the way down, he showed him his police ID and asked him what he was doing there, to which the driver replied that he's just sitting there and chatting with his girlfriend and is not doing anything illegal. After these words, the policeman asked to check both the driver's and his companion's IDs. While the man behind the wheel was handing out the documents, the woman in the passenger seat gave strange signals with her hands. It seemed as if she was asking for help. Every time her assumed boyfriend turned his head toward her, she stopped. Having noticed that, the officer asked the driver to step out of the car. The driver responded aggressively, telling Ravichandran that he was not a police officer, but a thief. After these words, he raised the window and reached for the key in the ignition. Realizing that the car would drive off, the policeman took out a pistol and shot the right front wheel, after which the car drove off at a high speed. Ravichandran, together with his partner, began a motorcycle chase, but for some reason they couldn't catch up to a car with a flat tire. This is the official version. The state of affairs in the Malaysian police at the time was such that it came as no surprise that the officer on duty did not call reinforcements and did not notify anybody about what happened. That car with a flat tire was the purple Proton Tiara, the transport of Kenny Ong, that will be found abandoned in a few days. And even though the chase did not end in favor of the police, now they had documents given by the driver. The man in the car was 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, and the woman was Kenny Ong. And if the officer in that situation behaved differently, then maybe Kenny would be alive. But sadly, Ravichandran notified his higher-ups about this situation only after Kenny's body was found. The only good thing that happened that night was probably that the officer had documents on the suspect. Besides Kenny's family, many Malaysians came to say goodbye to her. For Brandon, the death of his beloved wife was an irreparable loss. Meanwhile, the police began their search for Ahmad Najib. As it turned out, he never lived at the address listed in his documents. But his name was real, which meant there were many ways to find him. The police began searching for the name listed in the documents in the Registry of Documented Marriages and in the National Agency of Social Support. A match was found. Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and grew up in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 brothers and sisters in the family. Since he had to work and help the family, he dropped out of school. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur. Later, he got married and became the father of 2 children. Since 2000, he has worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of his wife and her place of work, the police began surveilling her. She worked in one of the metropolitan banks. Waiting until her shift was over, police officers, disguised in civilian clothes, followed her and found out her home address. Now the police knew where Ahmad lived, but to not scare him, they had to make sure that he was inside the house. For 3 days they watched the house, but the suspect did not appear once. The investigators began to doubt that Ahmad Najib still lives with his family, but these were hasty conclusions. On the 4th day of surveillance, around 4 a.m., they saw a cab pull up to the house, out of which Ahmad Najib got out. Just a minute later, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. Information about the arrest and identity of the suspect quickly leaked into the press. Many who knew Ahmad Najib couldn't believe that he was the one who kidnapped and took the life of Kenny Ong. He was a loyal husband, a caring father of 2 children, and generally gave the impression of a good man. But soon, officers were sure that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Najib was completely calm and stated during the first interrogation that he is only willing to talk with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. He started denying his guilt. Only as he was presented with evidence connecting him with Kenny Ong did his confidence start gradually fading. At first, he was shown 2 IDs that he gave to the officer on duty on the night of the kidnapping of Kenny. Then officers said that they found blood spots on his jacket and jeans, and that the DNA analysis will almost certainly show that this is the blood of Kenny Ong. Only after Najib realized that the officers were not bluffing and that they had irrefutable proof did he confess that he kidnapped and took Kenny's life. In 10 days from the moment of kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, Ahmad was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. During the next few days, the police conducted an investigatory experiment during which Najib showed all the places where he was with Kani, and explained in detail how and how many times he forced her into getting intimate with him, as well as how he took her life and how he tried to get rid of her body. In all places where Najib led the police, they found evidence confirming his words. At the underground parking lot where it all began, the cameras captured Ahmad Najib. According to him, he was waiting for his former boss, who fired him and whom he wanted to get revenge on. It is worth noting that the version about the former boss was not confirmed. By hiding in the darkness, he saw how Kani was looking for something in her car and decided to take advantage of it. He shoved her in the car and threatened her, telling her that if she tried to escape or call for help, she would regret it. Kani fell into a stupor and obediently complied with all his commands. Then he sat in the driver's seat and drove out of the parking lot at a high speed, breaking the barrier. Having stopped in an industrial area, he started harassing Kani, but right at that moment, a police officer in civilian clothes pulled up to the car. Najib was trying to convince the officers that he only realized that he kidnapped the wrong woman when the officer asked to check their IDs. Even if we assume that he did intend to kidnap his former boss, it still doesn't make him any less guilty, as, without a doubt, she would have suffered the same fate as Kani Ong. According to his words, Najib managed to escape the pursuit, and even though the officer had his documents, he didn't think to let Kani go. He stopped the car on the streets to replace a tire that had been punctured by a bullet. A car with a woman inside was parked near the place where he stopped. He walked over to her and asked for a jack. He wanted to change the tire, but then saw that Kani was signaling the woman with her hands, who landed him the jack, so he gave up on the idea of changing the tire and drove off right away. A bit later, he stopped at a deserted place and, threatening Kani with a knife, forced her to get intimate with him. Then he drove to another district, where he forced Kani to satisfy him once again. Both of them were in the back seat, and Kani was begging him for mercy, but instead, he took her life. Then he hid her body in a manhole near a highway, drove a car to another place, and left it there. 16 hours had passed before he returned to that place with a gasoline canister and tried to cover up the evidence of the crime. A DNA expertise confirmed that the semen found inside Kani Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also found in the car, as were his fingerprints, which was another irrefutable proof of his guilt. The expertise also determined that the blood found on his jacket and jeans was that of Kani Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, just 3 months after the death of Kani. This case became one of the most controversial in Malaysia, and it has received a great deal of attention from the media and the public. Such a high-profile trial has not only attracted ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also those who, in my opinion, decided to make a name for themselves, namely attorneys, of whom Najib had no shortage. Even though he admitted his guilt during the investigation, and there was more than enough proof of his crimes, including the DNA evidence, after consulting with 6 of his attorneys, Najib did not plead guilty at his first trial, stating to the court that he confessed under police pressure. But the judge, before whom Najib confessed right after his arrest, testified that at the time of confession there were no signs of physical abuse on the defendant and that he behaved in a calm and relaxed manner. With that in mind, the attorneys changed the tactic and began to argue that Kani was in the car with their client at her own will. Attorneys attributed it to the fact that Kani, having a black belt in Taekwondo, didn't try to escape. This attempt to put blame on the victim for not escaping was rejected, as everyone has a different response to critical situations. But they didn't stop there. Then they came up with a new version, stating that Kani got intimate with Ahmad Najib voluntarily, saying that Kani died from strangulation, which was practiced to spice up the sensations during the intercourse, but this version was challenged and denied by forensics experts. The cloth on Kani's neck was tied in several knots, which indicate that Najib had no intention of loosening it. In fact, the cloth was tied so tight that the skin underneath it was the only spot on the body not damaged by the fire. But that's not all. The cloth was designed for wiping windows on a plane, and considering that the defendant worked as a cabin cleaner, this connected him even more with the crime. Not to mention the fact that the lawyers didn't know how to explain the stab wounds on Kani's body. At that point, Najib's attorneys ran out of ideas and recommended that he just keep quiet and not give any testimony. Many were questioning why Kani didn't get out of the car when she had at least 2 opportunities to do so. Sadly, we will never get to know the answer. Maybe she simply froze out of fear and couldn't run away. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was found guilty on all charges. The judge said that the gathered evidence points to only one person. For committing the crime against the sexual integrity of Kani Ong, Najib was given the highest sentence according to Malaysian laws, 20 years in prison and 10 cane strikes. But he was also sentenced to death for taking her life. Those who frequently watch these kinds of videos about real crimes know that, for example, in the USA, criminals are executed with a lethal injection. However, in Malaysia, this process is very different. They do not use expensive drugs, but ropes, which are much cheaper. Ahmad Najib's attorneys made 2 attempts to appeal the sentence, but both of them failed. In 2010, Najib wrote to the head of the state with a request to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment. In his letter, he pleaded not guilty once again, but his clemency request was denied. On September 23, 2016, more than 13 years after Kani Ong's death, the sentence of 40-year-old Ahmad Najib was carried out. Take a look at this photo. It shows Rexford Lynn Keel Jr., better known as Lynn Keel, and his wife Elizabeth Bess Edwards Keel. They were married for over 20 years. In 2005, Lynn worked as a truck driver, and Elizabeth was an employee of Microbac Laboratories. Probably many of us have pictures that, when we look at them, we realize that shortly after the picture was taken, the lives of the people depicted in it changed dramatically. These words can be fully applied to this one as well. Lynn and Elizabeth lived in this house, which is located in Nash County, North Carolina. As you can see on the map, the place is quite secluded. As 2005 drew to a close, Lynn and Elizabeth, like many people, were making plans for the next year. But on January 1, 2006, trouble came to their house. It was cold, and the steps outside the house were covered in ice. As Elizabeth was leaving the house, she slipped and fell, hitting her head hard on the corner of the concrete steps. The injury she sustained was fatal. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy concluded that Elizabeth had died from a blunt force trauma to the head, and her death was ruled an accident. For her husband, relatives, colleagues, and friends, Elizabeth's sudden death was a great shock. She was only 42 years old. About 1 year passed and Lynn Keel decided to move on. He was no longer a truck driver, but worked in real estate. In 2007, he visited Latin America in a work-related visit. On that trip, Lynn, who was 45 years old at the time, met Diana, who was 19 years his junior. Diana was from Bogota, Colombia. She was strikingly beautiful, kind, and a single mom with a daughter. The relationship between them quickly developed, and with her thoughts of the American dream, Diana moved to the United States. She and Lynn began living in his home in Nash County, where about a year earlier, his wife Elizabeth Keel had died in an accident. It wasn't long before Diana and Lynn were married, and a short time later the couple had a son named Max. In 2017, Diana graduated from Nash Community College. That same year, she began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center. The first few years of their life together were nothing special, but over time their relationship began to deteriorate. Diana told her close friend that Lynn was an overbearing man who spoke sharply to her and very often verbally abused her. The atmosphere in the house was almost always very tense. Lynn would not allow Diana to be alone with anyone for long periods of time. She began to think about divorce, but she was afraid of her husband because he threatened her. He manipulated her with the baby. He threatened her and told her that if she left him, he would deport her and that she would never see her son again. Diana put up with it all because her children came first for her, but everyone's patience comes to an end sooner or later. In 2019, Diana's daughter Laura was 18, a graduate of Southern Nash High School and a freshman at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and 10-year-old Max was living with his parents. As I said, Diana worked as a nurse at Wilson Medical Center. She was loved and respected by patients and colleagues alike. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received a message in which Diana wrote, "Mom, I love you very much." The message came completely out of the blue. Esperanza knew her daughter didn't have a happy marriage and that she wanted to divorce her husband but was afraid of him. It was only 3 days after that, and Diana's daughter Laura sounded the alarm. On March 10th, she tweeted out a plea for help to find her mother. The message said, "This is insane. You see this happen to everyone else, and you don't think it's ever going to happen to you guys. My mom is missing. If you see or hear anything, please let me know. And please retweet this. Help me get the word out. Thank you." That same day, Laura called the medical center where her mother worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had spoken to her in the past 2 days. An employee of the medical center called the police and asked for a welfare check on Diana. A co-worker told the dispatcher that Diana hadn't been heard from in 2 days. "She was supposed to work tonight. She's on the schedule," the Wilson Medical Center nurse said. "She's the type of co-worker. She's always like 30 minutes early. And if you text her, she replies back like reasonably. She has not done any of them." The woman said it was out of character for Diana and asked the sheriff's office to perform a welfare check. Diana was a devoted mother who was in touch with her family every day. She checked her social media regularly, but now her messages went unread and her FaceTime calls unanswered. When a police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn was there. It was surprising that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, not him. Lynn told the police officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days earlier, on March 8th, when she left the house. Her car was still parked outside the house, which also aroused suspicion, so Lynn was called in for questioning. When questioned, Keel, 57, said his wife had gone out to run some errands and hadn't returned. He said she would leave from time to time and wouldn't return for several days. It was a statement that didn't ring true. Without any charges, the man was released. Diana was reported missing and the police began searching for her. Investigators were able to determine that the woman had not used her cell phone or bank cards in the past few days, and that was not a good sign. This house, as I said at the beginning of the video, is in a secluded location, and there are no neighbors to share any important information with the police. Nevertheless, detectives learned that on the morning of March 8th, the couple was seen having a heated argument on their front porch. A courier had delivered a package addressed to Diana that day, and he was the last person to see her, not counting Lynn Keel, of course. After the police interviewed Diana's co-workers, who told them that she was having problems with her husband, there was no doubt that she would not abandon her son and run away. The only thing that stopped her from divorcing was the fear of losing custody of her 10-year-old son. Everyone the detectives spoke to named only one person they thought might have been involved in Diana's disappearance. That person was her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, an ominous discovery was made. 2 years before Diana went missing, Lynn had insured her life for more than $1 million, and he was the sole beneficiary of this insurance. In 2008, sheriff's deputies responded to a domestic dispute in the house, although no further action was taken. Only 2 days had passed since the investigation began, and the police received a disturbing call. During the emergency call, a man, later identified as an employee of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, said he found something on Polk's Hole Road. "It looks like something is laying in the woods," he said. "I don't know what it is. A body, a something, I don't know." "How far down is it?" the dispatcher asked. "Right here at the end," the caller said. "I will be waiting right here." Unfortunately, what the man who called the police saw was Diana's body, which from the looks of it, had been there since the day she disappeared. It turned out that the worker was checking an illegal dump when he saw something suspicious. Polk's Hole Road is a dead-end street leading to farmland, and the fact that the body was found was fortunate, if fortunate is the right word under the circumstances. Who knows how long it would have taken the police to find Diana's body, for it was 30 miles away from her home. "I've heard nobody that knew her had anything negative to say about this woman," Nash County Sheriff Keith Stone said. "What a tragic event. Even more tragic, we now have a 10-year-old without a mom." Stone added, "It's very difficult, especially when I see life as it is and how fragile it is, and now we have a kid without a mother. It's very difficult. We have a lot of unanswered questions. That's the reason we, as the Nash County Sheriff's Office, operate with compassion, honor, and diligence." Although it remains unclear how the woman died, there is definitely foul play involved. The police had only one suspect, Lynn Keel. When he was informed that his wife had been found dead, he was very surprised. He was brought to the station for questioning, where he answered to investigators. He claimed, as before, that Diana had often gone away for several days, but that she had always returned. These words were inconsistent with what Diana's colleagues, relatives, and friends had said. Everyone knew that Lynn Keel controlled his wife's every move. He even forbade her to see her friends. After the interrogation, the man was released because the results of the autopsy had not yet been obtained. 2 days after the discovery of the body, authorities officially confirmed that the body was that of Diana Alejandra Keel. Her death was a painful blow to her children, family, and friends. Diana's daughter Laura created a GoFundMe page to help cover the funeral costs. "My priorities now are to make sure my mother is laid to rest in a manner much more fitting than her death, and to make sure my brother continues to feel the love that our mother shared with us daily," she wrote. "By doing so, I hope to honor my mother's legacy." Diana's cousin living in Colombia told reporters that the mother of two came to North Carolina to live the American dream, but it ended up being a nightmare. "I can't believe it," said Javier Guevara. "I can't believe it. It's very, very sad." After the medical examiner's report was obtained, the frightening details of Diana's death became known. She had extensive skull fractures as well as multiple sharp injuries on the left side of her face and neck. Some of the injuries were post-mortem, which could mean that the person who inflicted them had a personal grudge against Diana. By the time police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, he had gone on the run. He was put on a nationwide wanted list, and a report stated that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and warned that he might be dangerous. It was learned that after Lynn Keel left the police station after being questioned, he drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and fled. According to a warrant to search the home Diana and Lynn Keel shared, authorities seized a variety of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers. Also seized were swords, a machete, and several knives. Warrants show that authorities found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana Keel's 18-year-old daughter inside a Dodge Ram Lynn Keel owned. When the sheriff was asked about their contents, he replied that he did not feel comfortable divulging what was written on those pages. Meanwhile, the search for Lynn Keel continued. It was determined that he had left the state, but his whereabouts were unknown. Stone said the sheriff's office had received calls from Texas and Florida about Keel's truck, but no additional details about his capture were confirmed. He asked the public to drive by local motels and hotels and see if they would notice a pickup truck with the license plate number listed on the information sheet distributed. "We have no idea where he might be," he said. "This is an opportunity for the public to help because this person is dangerous." On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was discovered, Lynn Keel was seized by Arizona State Police 34 miles from the U.S. border with Mexico. He was in possession of a large sum of cash and a large quantity of various canned goods. He was allegedly planning to cross the border and escape into Mexican territory. After his arrest, Lynn Keel was airlifted to Nash County, where he was charged in connection with the death of his wife, Diana. Experts believed she was still alive when she was loaded into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left for dead. Lynn Keel was therefore also charged with kidnapping. When searching the house, forensic investigators found overwhelming evidence that the attack on Diana took place in the bedroom. According to the prosecutor, after taking Diana to a remote area, Keel went to a local Walmart where he bought cleaning supplies, with which he tried to cover up evidence of the crime. After he was arrested, Diana's daughter, Laura, wrote the following words on her Facebook account. "I know everyone has a certain feeling towards what my stepdad did to my family. However, I beg all of you not to spread hate. My brother has such a pure heart that he doesn't need to see that hate. We all need to focus on how wonderful my mother was to heal us as best we can." The brutal nature of the crime and Keel's subsequent flight from justice drew local, state, and national media attention to the case. The media attention caused the public defender at the time to ask for a change in venue so that a jury pool could be selected outside of Nash County. Despite the widespread nature of the media attention focused on the crime, the motion for a change in venue focused specifically on the perceptions in Nash County. The media coverage included, among other things, press conferences by the Nash County Sheriff, many written articles in local newspapers, online articles, television coverage, as well as social media discussion. Discussion in the media included speculation surrounding the passing of the defendant's previous wife, the motion stated. The state objected to the motion, but did note that the state had concerns over efficiency and a waste of resources and time should a trial begin in Nash County and then be required to be transferred to another venue after the trial process begins in Nash County, the motion stated. In the end, Nash County Superior Court Judge Quentin Sumner decided to move the venue to Pitt County. In the document outlining his decision, Sumner stated that there exists in Nash County a prejudice against this defendant so that he cannot obtain a fair and impartial trial within Nash County. In October 2021, Rexford Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges against him to avoid a lengthy trial. A no contest plea, similar to a guilty plea, means that the defendant accepts responsibility for the charge. Keel pled to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense attorneys asked that the judge takes into account that he has been experiencing kidney failure and has been incarcerated for the past 2 years. But at sentencing, Diana's mother reminded the court of the reason her daughter was no longer alive. She said she wanted to tell women that if their partner was abusive, they needed to run. "Don't stay there," she begged, as she asked the judge for a severe sentence. "I want you to have the same compassion for Keel that he had when he killed her." Diana's cousin released the following statement. "From all of Diana Alejandra Keel's family, we want to extend a huge thank you to all law enforcement involved in apprehending and bringing Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder, to face justice. I want to express the immense gratitude our family has felt, including the true empathy from the Nash County Sheriff's Office, along with so many heartfelt messages of support and love since this nightmare began. We know Diana Alejandra has been seen by the public for the amazing mother, daughter, sister, cousin, friend, and co-worker that she was. She loved her 2 children more than I can ever express. Everything she did was for them. She brought joy into this world with her contagious laugh, bright smile, and huge heart for others, including animals. To all that knew her, and those that would have liked to have known her, please think of her and her children only with the kindest thoughts and positive energy possible. Thank you so much for your continued support." Lynn Keel did not say what the motive for the crime was. Perhaps he learned that Diana was meeting with a lawyer and wanted to begin divorce proceedings. We should also not forget the insurance policy worth more than $1 million. Under the plea agreement, Lynn Keel was sentenced to between 32 and 41 years in prison. But that's not all. Police had questions relating to the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth. Was her death really an accident? Her family said they always had questions about her death. In a statement, Elizabeth Keel's family said they have always questioned Bess's death and feel deeply saddened that another life has now been taken. We're going to work all the leads on that, and we're going to go back and look at the information we had on the first incident reports, Stone said. We're going to talk with the district attorney's office. It's something that we need to be looking at. Elizabeth Keel is buried in a family plot in Spring Hope. Stone said right now he is working with a pathologist and going over all of the evidence. He said there is a strong possibility they will exhume Elizabeth Keel's body. Dr. John Butts was the chief medical examiner in North Carolina for 24 years. One would only go to exhume a body if there was some question that wasn't addressed at the time that could be addressed by re-examining the remains, Butts said. According to him, there have been many cases in his career where a death deemed accidental turned out to be murder. Someone falls off of something and was killed, and then additional information turns out that they didn't fall. They were pushed, and there would be no difference in examination. We'd have the same findings, but of course now the circumstances leading up to why it happened have changed, Butts said. No new information related to the death of Elizabeth Keel has appeared over the past 2 years. We can assume that authorities have found no reason to reopen the investigation and exhume the body, but it is possible that we will hear more about this case in the future.